Dear learners, welcome back to SWAYAM NPTEL course on Library Automation and Networking. This is week 4, module 4, lecture number 19, title of the lecture Retrospective Conversion, Planning, Standards and Tools. Dear learners, we have already discussed about many aspects of retrospective conversions. What do you mean by retrospective conversion? How do we do such kind of a retrospective conversion and what are the advantages of doing that? How do we make retrospective conversion in a particular library in a smooth manner? So this we have already discussed about different aspects. Today we will be discussing more about planning, standards and tools which are very much required for retrospective conversion. So we will be discussing in detail the aspects like planning for retrospective conversion, what are the steps to be taken care while going for a planning of retrospective conversion, and what are the different types of standards which are available or which are exclusively for retrospective conversion of different documents. So that also we will be discussing in detail, and finally we will be also discussing about what are the tools which are available to perform a retrospective conversion or what kind of method will be adopted to perform a retrospective conversion. We will be discussing in details all these three areas. So when we talk about retrospective conversion, as the definition says that it is converting the manual catalog or the database of a particular person or a members of a library into a machine readable format, so that you will be able to search and retrieve, dissemination will be easy, and we will be following some kind of a standards or policies to perform this particular task. So when any library plan to have a retrospective conversion of a particular group of collection, we need to have a complete planning. So when we talk about planning, it should have major 3 points: what to convert, when to convert and how to convert. So these are the major 3 questions should be asked before you plan any retrospective conversion. So by employing proper methods and procedures and planning, a library can do or perform this particular retrospective conversion to make their collection accessible, discoverable, and making such kind of a collection machine readable, and so that you can increase or enhance the accessibility and visibility of that particular collection. As we know that there are many techniques or technologies we can use to convert a particular material which is available either in print format or in any other format in the form of a catalog, so that can be converted into a machine readable format, or the catalog or the database of particular member can be converted into a medium in which it can be searched, it can be machine readable, it can have a greater access to the users. So when we talk about planning, so we should keep some of the areas in mind. So what are the different areas of planning, or what are the different steps to be followed while planning a retrospective conversion? So let us look into one by one. The first thing is the following methods you can see when you plan for a particular retrospective conversion. That means these are all the points which should be kept in mind before you start a particular retrospective conversion as part of planning process. The first step is assessment, second step is prioritization, third step is planning and budgeting, fourth step is conversion and quality control, and the last step is access and preservation. That means the fifth step is access and preservation. So there are major 5 steps to be followed while you planning for a retrospective conversion, irrespective of the nature of collection or the nature of library or how long you are taking this particular conversion. So all this doesn't matter, but as soon as you plan that you will go for a retrospective conversion of the materials which are available in printed format or register format or written format, that has to be converted into a machine readable form so that your accessibility and discoverability can be enhanced. So you need to plan in such a way that you will have all these 5 steps of planning. Let us discuss one by one. So the first step of planning any kind of retrospective conversion is assessment. So that means the current state of the library or library collection should be assessed properly. What do you mean by the assess of that particular collection? That means how much collection do you have? and what are the collection in which you are going to make as retrospective conversion. So in what medium they are available, or how the quantity and how the type of materials available. So all this should have a complete assessment of a library's collection in which it holds should have a part of assessment. That means you have to assess the number of resources, the type of resources, the category of resources, or the nature of resources which are available in a particular collection of a particular library should be completely assessed in terms of its quality, formats, types, categories, etc. Apart from that, any specific requirement or challenge is associated with that particular collection also need to be assessed. Say for example, when you talk about a manuscript or when you talk about a printed catalog, so these two things in terms of sustainability or the method of handling, it is different. So there is a challenge behind this particular manuscript because they are maybe because of very old or because of the age of that particular manuscripts, it is not that easy to handle because it is in the verge of damage or under the deterioration condition, so that you have to make some kind of a arrangement for that also. So this challenge or some kind of a special requirement need to be assessed in the initial stage itself. So this is what first step says. When you talk about the second stage, that is prioritization. So as the name indicates, prioritize means you are making some kind of a prioritizing category. That means you are making some kind of slabs or division or category in which is the most important one and which is the least important one, or what should be taken care first and what should be taken care the next. So like that you should make some kind of a category based on the priority. That priority measurement can be different. It can be based on its value, or maybe its demand, or it can also be based on its condition. So these are some of the parameters you can use it for prioritizing the things. So that means you have a collection, you have already planned that this particular collection based on that category you will be selected, and once that planning assessment is completed, then the second stage is you are going to make a prioritization, or under this particular collection which document I will take first, on what basis. So you can make some kind of a parameters like in terms of quality, value, sometimes kind of conditions, anything can be part of that. And sometimes we need to take care of the demand of the users also. Sometimes users say that this particular document is having huge demand or they require it badly. So in such cases also we need to give some kind of a prioritization based on the demand of that particular document from a user side. So these are all some of the parameters which you can adopt while you are planning and while you are making prioritization. The third step is planning and budgeting. So planning and budgeting is not part of planning alone. It is something like that you are planning the funding resources or the economic source or the budget which is required to perform that particular activity. That is one of the important criteria for doing any kind of activity. You need some kind of a source of funding, so then only you will be able to deploy staff or infrastructure or the supporting documents. All these things can be made only based on the budget availability. So you need to be thorough when you are planning. So once the assessment is completed, then you go for prioritization. So once assessment and prioritization completed, then the third stage is to make a complete planning of budget. That means how much amount you have, how much amount can be spent for this, and how much will be the cost of the conversion. So these are all should have a approximate planning, so where you will not be having any issue with the financial constraints. So planning and budgeting includes determining the timeline, resource allocation, technology requirements, and also potential partnership or outsourcing options. So this you need to be very much clear. Once the planning, once the assessment and the prioritization done, planning and budgeting is more important. And the fourth stage is conversion and quality control. So when we talk about conversion, as we know that you are converting from one medium to the other medium, that is normally analog to digital. So it is a complex task, it is a challenging procedure, so that should have a proper planning. So that means how do you perform this particular activity for converting from one medium to the other medium? That means without losing its quality. So the quality cannot be compromised, because you need to apply many of the technologies to make it perfect because you are doing at one time. So all this retrospective conversion at the same time you are doing. Why? Because we are planning all these stages to make error-free scanning or error-free storage and error-free access. So you need to make sure that the quality control should be maintained, even you use optical character recognition software and tagging sometimes, and also file format standardization. So which one we should use, what is the standard you need to follow, and what is the software we need to use, and how this scanning will be done, and what is the measurement for scanning. So what kind of quality standard we will be maintaining. So all this you should have a clear idea when we talk about quality control. So the output of that particular retrospective conversion should be error free. So that is the meaning of having a quality control while doing this particular step. And the fifth step is access and preservation. So once you have done all these assessment, prioritization, budget control, then you made a quality control. That means up to here you are very much clear that you will be performing this particular task in the way in which you plan. And the fifth step is access and preservation. So once you have completed all your retrospective conversion, so what is the way in which you are accessing it and how you will be able to preserve it for a long term? Because the objective of any retrospective conversion to enhance its sustainability so that the people from the coming generation can use that particular resource without any hindrance. So when we talk about such kind of a storage or preservation mechanisms, we should think about what are the technologies available to preserve, in which storage medium you will be using, so whether this particular storage medium can sustain for a long time. So you need to ensure all the conservation and preservation policies, standards and maintenance of all such file formats should be unique and it should be standardized. So you can select many of the standards which we will be talking in the coming classes. There are many standards in such a way that we can use for file and we can use for storage and we can use for the conversion or retrieval also. So established standards or international standards in which the libraries are using in a successful manner has to be adopted. So that planning has to be done in the fifth stage of this particular retrospective conversion activity. So these are all the 5 major steps we need to follow when you are planning for a particular retrospective conversion process. Now let us look into the standards which are available. As we have already discussed that you need to follow some kind of a standard to make this particular document quality controlled and it should be sustained for a long time. So it should be in a unique format and it should be it should follow some kind of a uniformity, as well as it should be compatible with the existing systems. It should also have the characteristics of having for a longer generation. That means the preservation and the storage medium, the policy should be compatible for a longer time. So let us look into the standards which are available in retrospective conversion. So when we talk about standards, as we can say that standards can be in a different categories. There are different types of standards available under different categories. So what are those categories we will discuss first, then we will go to the standards available. So when you are planning for retrospective conversion, the standards also to be planned. So what are the standards available? So what are the categories of standards? The first one is metadata standards, which are related to bibliographical details, and then digitization standard, which are completely related to the process of digitization, in which what standard or which standard you need to follow, and the data formats in which you are going to save that particular document after conversion, that means data formats or data standards. Or the next one is standards related to OCR accuracy, that means you are making a kind of reading or you are making that particular scan file in an editable format. So we need to use some kind of a standards that we call it as OCR, optical character recognition accuracy standards, that has to be decided. Accessibility standards, how do we access a particular resource, through which medium, through which protocol, or what is the standard for having access to that particular document. So accessibility standards have to be confirmed. Copyright and intellectual property rights, which are all related to the legal measures, how permission can be adopted and what standard we need to follow to have a copyrighted material. This has to be decided as a standard. And then finally preservation standard, on what kind of medium you will be storing and what kind of format you have to use to preserve such kind of materials which is already been converted from a print medium to the digital medium or analog medium to a electronic medium. So that has to be decided. So these are all the major standards which are related to metadata, which are related to digitization process, which are related to the file formats, OCR accuracy, accessibility, copyright and intellectual property, and then finally the preservation. So we will look into one by one what are those standards and what are the different types of standards available with examples. As we have discussed that metadata standards, there are different types. These are all the examples for metadata standards, like we use Dublin Core metadata, we use metadata object description schema, that is MODS. We have metadata encoding and transmission standards, that is metadata standard transmission standard, METS. We have encoded archival description, or we short form we use EAD. Preservation metadata implementation strategies, that is PREMIS, PREMIS. Then we have text encoding initiative, that is TEI. We have IIIF, that is International Image Interoperability Framework, IIIF. So these are all some of the selected metadata standards. Any one of these standards can be adopted when you are planning for a retrospective conversion. So the next standard is digitization standards, and there are some kind of a guidelines which are provided by Federal Agencies Digitization Guidelines Initiative, that is FADGI, and also one more agency, International Organization for Standardization, as we know that ISO. So they have formulated some kind of a policy. This policy need to be adopted when you are going for a digitization. That means the standard which is prescribed in these agencies have to be followed, that we call it as digitization standards. And the next one is data formats. As we know that the data in which you are going to store, so the format of the data need to be decided. So there are some established data formats. As you know that PDF/A, that means portable document format for archives. It is normally a document format. And there are image format like JPEG 2000 and audio format like WAV. So these are all some of the formats which is exclusively used in the case of retrospective conversion of documents. So either document, when you are keeping it as image, when you are keeping it as audio file or video file, different types of formats are available. So you need to be very selective while choosing such kind of a selective method. So another standard is, as we have discussed, OCR standard, OCR accuracy standard or optical character recognition standard. So there is some kind of a policy or initiative made for this particular purpose, that we call it as established by the Text Encoding Initiative, that is TEI. So this can be used for OCR accuracy. And the next standard is accessibility standards. So how do we access that particular resource? So there are guidelines, web content accessibility guidelines, that we used as acronym WCAG. So they have some set of standards. How do we make sure that you will be providing this particular access to a particular material? So based on these standards will be used for accessibility. And the standard we used for copyright and intellectual property standards. So as we know that it is a sensitive area where we have to take care of the copyrighted materials. There should not be any kind of legal issues further happens once you have done all the process. Standards have to be decided at this stage to perform this copyright and intellectual property. So IFLA has given some kind of a guidelines or standards for providing such kind of a copyrighted material. International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, IFLA has formulated some guidelines for this particular copyrighted issues. And also one of the leading organization in the intellectual property right, that is World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, they have also formulated some kind of guidelines when you deal with copyrighted materials. So that also has to be part of standardization. So now we talk about preservation standards. That means we need to follow some standards for even while preserving such kind of a documents. Trusted Digital Repository Certification of Data, one of the standards for preservation, OASIS, and also OAIS, Open Archival Information System, OAIS. This is also one of the leading standards which can be used for preservation of materials. Open Archival Information System Reference Model, this is OAIS reference model, also one of the reference model which can be used for preserving the materials. So we need to follow these standards. So these are all the major standards which are available in the scenario of retrospective conversion of documents, so that your planning, everything will be in a smooth manner in a standard format. So when we talk about metadata standards, as we have seen that it is one of the crucial area in which you need to follow. So this will be always talking about the metadata related guidelines. So that means metadata standards will be talking about the standards, procedures or guidelines which has to be followed, which are related to the bibliographical details of a particular document in which you are going to make a retrospective conversion. And the next one is digitization standards. While digitizing the material, this particular standard will give you a complete details how to perform this digitization and what kind of measurement you have to use for making the material in a digitized format, etc. Including resolution, color management, file information, etc. Again, data formats. So this will be giving some kind of a guidelines for archiving that particular metadata. This will be talking about the preservation of that kind of a data which are compatible with archival systems. So that is also one of the important standards we need to follow while making the retrospective conversion. Reliability and usability of the document which is already been done as a textual document, so that has to be ensured by OCR mechanism. That means the OCR accuracy standards will give you a complete scenario of evaluating that particular material you have already scanned. So OCR accuracy standards provide guidelines for evaluating the accuracy of text conversion from scanned documents. So adhering to OCR accuracy standard ensure reliability and usability of that particular document which has been converted into digital format. Accessibility standards, as you know, these standards will provide a complete scenario or guidelines for giving how do we access, that means mainly this particular resource will be accessed by the users. So without any interruption, the smooth access of that particular resource will be available through this particular standard. Copyright and intellectual property standards will always give a proper guidelines how do we deal with copyrighted material. Preservation and standards format also will give a complete idea or the guidelines for preserving the material for a long-term use without any kind of sustainability issue. So now we will quickly see what are the tools available for retrospective conversion. As we have already seen that there should be a planning for retrospective conversion. Once it is planned, there should be a selection of standards in different aspects when you are going for a retrospective conversion. And what are the tools available for retrospective conversion? The first tool when we talk about retrospective conversion is availability of scanners. That means we need a scanner as a prerequisite for doing any kind of documentation work in the form of retrospective conversion. So you will make the document available in any of the format into a scan format so that the resource will be available in a scan format. So scanners always you should use some kind of a hi-fi machines, and when you talk about scanners you need to use a established scanner which can scan the document without losing any of its characteristics. That means you are digitally converting that particular document using a scanner. So there are different types, there are different examples for scanners, say for example flatbed scanners, sheet fed scanner, microfilm or microfiche scanners, document scanners, large format scanners, book scanners or high speed production scanners. So any of these scanners can be used for a better quality while converting into a medium of analog to digital. The next is optical character recognition. So as we know that it is used to make the particular format editable, so that you need to use some kind of a software for editing the scanned document. These softwares are utilized to convert scanned images into a text file which are editable and also searchable. So we have many such kind of a softwares, say for example, Abby Fine Reader, Tessir Act OCR, Readris, OmniPage, OCRopus, etc. So these are all some of the examples for OCR softwares. Any of the one which you feel that it is comfortable for you and it can be accommodated with your funding limitations, so that can be adopted. There are many metadata tools are available for extracting the documents or extracting the metadata details that also need to be implemented. And there are manual cataloging procedures. Normally we convert using a manual system that you can take such kind of a metadata details and type it in the software in which you are using. So that manual data entry is also possible, but you have to make sure that you are following the standards without creating any kind of errors while doing data entry. Automated cataloging systems. As we know that there are integrated library systems which are available in commercial or proprietary manner, or there are softwares which are available under open source free software. So such kind of integrated library system can be used either to manually type the metadata details, or maybe you can import such kind of details from the other sources. There are metadata standards we can use, as we have seen so many metadata standards like Dublin Core, MODS, METS. There are so many metadata standards which we have already seen. So any of the metadata standards can be used so that your retrospective conversion will be done in a standard format. Apart from this, you have data management tools and also preservation tools. As we know that database management system can store a lot of materials in a systematic and a categorized manner. Even in the similar way, digital preservation tools also will help you to make such kind of a document which is already been converted into digital format for a longer time without losing its authenticity, reliability, or without making any kind of changes in the format in which it is saved for a longer use or for a longer term preservation. There are also tools available for quality control as well as validations. So in order to keep the accuracy of the digitized metadata, we can always use validation tools or quality control tools. Apart from this, we can have collaboration with vendors as well as the suppliers, or who are dealing as a outside agency. So this also will help you to make your perfect standardization in retrospective conversion, because agencies, they have their own standard format, so you no need to worry about the standards. They will be taken care by such kind of a standards while doing the retrospective conversion. Dear learners, with this let me conclude this particular session, as we have seen how do we plan for a retrospective conversion, how do we make standardization of retrospective conversion, and what are the tools which are available, which are popular and which are highly established to perform retrospective conversion. So when you are doing retrospective conversion, you should be very planned. You should plan, you should assess that, you should make some kind of an assessment, and then you prioritize the items, and then you go for budget checking, and once it is done, you go for the metadata standards, preservation standards, documentation standards, file formats, and then you can use or you can choose many of the tools which are available in the market. Either you can go for open source, or you can go for the one which is available in the proprietary manner, based on your requirement, based on your nature of collection, the quality you wanted to maintain, the quantity of resources which are available, and these are all related to retrospective conversions, planning, standardization, and tools. With this, I hope that you could get a much idea about how do we plan a retrospective conversion, and what are the standards available, and how do we go for such kind of a standards, and what is the benefits of using such kind of a standards, and also the tools which are available, the softwares which are available, or the techniques and technologies are available to perform all such kind of activities which are related to retrospective conversion. Thank you.